I just realized now that every time I hear the Way of the Leaf, I just think of that meme from the Airbender kid from Legend of Korra.
Be the leaf.
I love that kid. He was wonderful. But we're not talking about that fantasy series, even though I love it very much. We're talking about Wheel of Time. This time, the 5th episode, Blood Calls Blood. I am very excited to talk about this episode because it seems to be setting up a lot of really cool stuff. This was more of a transitional episode, getting characters from A to B and like setting them up for the next phase of this season, as well as giving us some really strong emotional moments. Like there was some stuff I was like, dang, that hit particularly hard for obvious reasons that we'll talk about as we get into this a little bit more. And there'll be a little bit of a warning before we get to that because it is a little bit harder, I know, specifically for some folks. But I'm excited to talk about this entire episode because I think there's some really cool stuff here. But before we get into that, if you happen to be new to this channel or my reviews of Wheel of Time, I just want to let y'all know that this is from the perspective of someone who has not read the book. So I'm giving you my sort of fresh, unvarnished, untainted, uncorrupted view of this show without having read the book. So if there's stuff in the books and things like that that you're like, oh, they changed this, they got this wrong, totally okay. That's a legitimate criticism, but it's something that I don't really know. And I would just ask that you don't spoil in the comments because I had a few people just spoil a few things for me, which is cool. I totally get it. Just give a little bit of a warning before you leave that in the comments. But overall, I do want to say I'm loving the comments. This is some of the comments on these videos are some of the most engaged and thoughtful and really awesome comments that I've gotten in any of my reviews, even my Star Trek reviews, to be honest with you, which just shows me that I'm right in getting excited about this show, and I am very excited once the season ends to read at least the first book. I might not read ahead of the show, but we'll see. But just thank you everyone for being so engaged and awesome in the comments. I just asked, like, give a little bit of a spoiler warning if you're gonna get into spoilers from the books, just so I know to be like, oh, I'm gonna skirt around that. I'm just not gonna read that because I don't want to ruin my perspective and my fun. I don't know why I suddenly became like Foghorn Leghorn for a second there, but there you go. Also, one other quick thing, too, is I meant to get this episode out earlier, but I'm releasing it again on Monday like I did last week. I've come to realize that my weekends are a little bit too busy around the Christmas time for me to really get these out, like, right when the episode comes out on Friday. So just expect these reviews from now on to go up on Monday, which hopefully will be a nice, like, way to start your work week if you're working. So I hope that this is a good time for everybody. It seems like people seem to still watch the videos then. So, yeah, I don't want to stress myself out over the weekend to get these out on time right after the episode goes up. So as long as you're cool with it, episodes are going up on Monday. So as I said before, this episode feels very much like a transitional episode where we're moving from the traveling phase of the first part of the series into getting all our characters into Tar Valon, the sort of main big city of, at least, the only city that I really know within the Wheel of Time. And by the way, I'm very excited because this is the Vagina City. There's one thing that I knew about Wheel of Time before going into this show, and it was that this city is shaped like a giant vagina and the tower is a giant penis. I think that that's hilarious and obviously very much about like the feminism and gender aspect of this series in general, but I just like it's a city shaped like a vagina. I'm glad that's the one fact about Wheel of Time that I know very well. But yes, this episode is very much about all these characters entering the lovely womb embrace of Tar Valon. Sorry, everybody. But my terrible vaginal humor aside, let's talk about each group specifically. So first off, we have Perrin and Egwene still with the Way of the Leaf people, the pacifist people. And it was really interesting because the opening bit of this segment of the story felt like it was critiquing this pacifist mindset of these people. I mean, first off, you have Perrin criticizing how their animals still attack while the Way of the Leaf people are pacifists, and it's like, oh, it's kind of hypocritical. I mean, it's a dumb argument because it's like, we're not animals, so yeah, that kind of what separates us. The pacifism is what separates us from the animals. It's kind of the whole point. But then immediately after that, we also have another scene that critiques pacifism with them confronting the White Cloaks and Child Valda, who we'll be talking about in just a second because I'm excited to talk about him. He's probably my favorite part of the episode. But we had the Way of the Leaf people once Valda saw Perrin and Egwene saying, I want them, because he recognizes them. The Way of the Leaf people link arms and sort of pacifist, like, we're not going to take your crap and we're going to protect them way of doing things. And of course, the White Cloaks just start smacking people and using violence. And this makes sense to me. Like, pacifism and a non-violent protest have their place, and I think an important place. But usually it is more of a symbolic gesture, even in people getting hurt in a symbolic way in order to protest these sort of actions. But they weren't really protesting anyone. No one was really watching them. And unfortunately, people ready to use violence will use violence. Nonviolence very much works when there's someone watching, not to directly confront violent people. So I thought it was a really smart scene when they just start smacking them around and they eventually get Egwene and Perrin. Then we get both of them taken away by the White Cloaks, and we get a really honestly, it was a very hard scene to watch with Egwene being dragged down with that brush and then brought in front of Child Valda. And everything here with Child Valda was so wonderful. I love just the subtle stuff that you see in the scene where when they strap her arms to the chair, you see the blood on the rope just indicating what goes on in this chair. And Child Valda is just so I love watching him because he is just awful. And I love how he turns everything against her in a very religious fundamentalist way, where she says, like, you know, I'm nobody. He says, oh, everybody's important under the light. And it's just like using that sort of indoctrination, that sort of religious mindset to, twist someone's words against them. I thought was just, and it also spoke greatly to his ideology, which I thought was fascinating. And obviously and we get a little bit more about what the White Cloaks believe in this episode, in that they believe that, you know, people should not have this type of power, and that they believe that the Aes Sedai's power comes from darkness, not light. And so I think that was just a cool religious fundamentalist idea, and also kind of shows a bit of the like way sexism works in this society as well. And so I thought that was just a really cool piece of ideology to learn here. One thing I found very fascinating, though, was we do learn that while they don't like the Aes Sedai, Valda does believe the Aes Sedai don't tell lies, part of their oath that we learned from Moraine a few episodes ago, because when Egwene says, I can't channel, he instantly believes her, which I thought was kind of interesting, that even though they dislike the Aes Sedai, that they do believe in their oaths, which is, it's an interesting, because there's part of me that's like, I would think that they would think less of them, but I actually like that they hold the Aes Sedai in some esteem and respect, and not underestimating them, and kind of understanding their ideology and how much they are as dogmatic about it as the White Cloaks are about theirs. And so I kind of like that, like, respect that you don't necessarily see in these types of engagements between people that are vilifying each other. I thought that was actually kind of cool to see there. And we also learn a little bit more about how channeling works, that it's tend to be believed that channeling requires hands, hence why the hands are strapped down and why he cuts off people's hands at times to stop them from channeling. But then he starts torturing Perrin in order to force Egwene to use some channeling magic, which we haven't seen her be able to use before now. So this is a really great tense scene, and I understood that it was probably getting to the point where we were going to see Egwene channel, and so I thought that was really, really cool. And I also like the scene where Perrin reveals that he killed his wife at the beginning of the season, and that Egwene sort of says, like, hey, no, you don't feel guilt about that during that tense moment. And I also love that she finally does channel, which is a really cool sequence to see, and I love that she got all this power, and then she just like poof, and it just hits Val, then he's like poof, he just laughs at it. But I did like that he was kind of scared for a hot second there, if you watch his reaction. And I thought that was a really cool moment, because it kind of contrasts with Nynaeve from last episode, where she was just so powerful on her first use of this ability, or one of her first uses of this ability. And for Egwene, she's just kind of like poof, she's got like weak little magic, which I thought was a nice little contrast. But then Perrin just like wolfs out and controls wolves to just decimate the White Cloaks, which was awesome. I thought that was really, really cool, badass moment, and Perrin definitely leveling up. And it's interesting to me because this clearly seems like a different type of power than the channeling that we've seen so far, which very much seems like air kind of magic. Controlling wolves doesn't immediately read to me that's something that people normally do in this world. I might be wrong. Maybe it is just part of like how male channelers work, quote unquote male channelers here. I don't know enough about the lore of the series, but it is interesting because it is distinctly different from how Aes Sedai work. And so I wonder if it's just like a sex thing, a gender thing, or if it's a something else that's going on here with Perrin. So cool end to that story there. Jumping over to another storyline, though, we now have Rand and Mat going into Tar Valon, and Mat is very much just not doing well. He's looking very sick. It seems to be because he is a channeler, and that's sort of the implication here. I am curious if that's actually the case, though, because we haven't actually seen him channel, and I feel like would be a little bit easy if like all of our main characters end up being channelers. I mean, already Perrin and Egwene and Nynaeve can. I would assume Rand or Mat will, but here's my guess. This is just my complete guess based on what they're setting up here in this scene, because we have a scene as they're going into Tar Valon where they watch Logain, who was gentled last episode, and he sees Mat and starts laughing, kind of hinting at the fact that maybe Mat is going to follow the same path as him because he is a channeler. And Mat says, if I ever end up like that because I'm a channeler, you kill me. Like, just end me now. And Rand says, I will, even though he's a little bit hesitant about that. But I think that this is going to be a subversion, that Mat has something else going on with him, and that Rand is actually going to be a channeler, and he might going down the path of Logain, and Mat's going to have to be the one that kills him, which I think that's my idea of what this subversion is setting up. That's just a complete guess. I haven't read the book, so I don't know if that's the case, but that's my theory right now for that. We'll see if that actually, eventually pays off. But then we also meet Loyal, who is a Ogier. This guy is going to be one of my favorite characters. This is like a type of character that would not exist in something like Game of Thrones, which is like much more grounded in its fantasy. And I'm not just talking about the fact that he's an Ogier, because I totally buy that, and I liked his look. I thought it was a unique look for an Ogier that looked a little bit low budget, especially the hair. The hair was strange, but I kind of weirdly, it endeared me to him a little bit more with the hair. But it was a different look for this sort of thing that like works on a lower, like low budget feeling for me, that I thought was kind of fun. But more so, his character type is just something that wouldn't be in Game of Thrones. He just seems like so earnest and endearing and lovely, and I'm like, oh, you're just such an adorable little dork. And he's just like, he also reads like very autistic to me. Again, autistic coding stuff, this is just my perspective on it, but he's very much like, I don't read social signals, I'm just gonna say things out loud. So there's that little problem of like, again, putting like autistic people as some other type of fantasy creature, but I get it, it's fantasy, it happens. And I really do love, I love him. I think he might end up being my favorite from what little I saw of him this episode. He was just absolutely adorable and wonderful, and his scene with Rand was just warmed my heart, and I'm excited to see more of him. But then right after that, we have him bring Night and Eve over to Matt and Rand, and this was a cool little sequence here because we got to finally get to see our characters come together. I also like that we haven't really seen a lot with Night. I'm trying to remember. I don't know if we've seen much of these characters interacting at all way back in the first episode, so I like the implication that there's that they're friends and they're reconnecting. And so it kind of felt like that Lord of the Rings Return of the King moment where everyone's jumping into Frodo's bed in a weirdly totally not homo, totally not gay thing going on there. But this was interesting, and obviously Matt lashes out at her for a quick second, which is sort of hinting at what's coming down the pike with him. Again, don't know what's going to happen, but it seems like they're definitely building something up with him there. But speaking of Night and Eve, though, this brings us to our final storyline for the episode, where we have Night and Eve and Moiraine, Lan, and all the other Aes Sedai arriving at the White Tower, which I'm just going to call the Tower of Sexual Tension, because literally everyone in almost every sequence in this episode just seemed to have some sort of either sexual or romantic tension with each other, and I was here for it. There must be a lot of like off-screen fucking going on in this tower, because I'm just feeling it everywhere in these scenes. But obviously we have Stepan, who lost his Aes Sedai last episode, just mourning and being all sad. I thought it was like really kind of funny where we had that 1 month time jump here after they bury Stepan's Aes Sedai, and then it just cuts back and it's been 1 month and he's still riding with her lone horse looking sad. I'm like, dude, it's been a month. I know you're still upset, but like, do you really have to look like I'm just sad with the horse this entire time? It was just kind of like, oh no, it's so sad still. But they arrive at the tower, and Stepan is very much depressed. It really read like someone who has lost a lover, a partner in marriage. I mean, I know that's what it's supposed to clearly evoke, but even deeper than that, quote unquote. But I know that that's basically what this is trying to show, that Stepan's like, people are trying to say, like Lan's trying to say, you know, you'll find someone else, you'll get a new woman, and someone's like, I can't replace her, and very much feeling that, and seeming to start to get over it over the course of the episode. There's a wonderful scene with him and Lan where they're like joking around about like finding men and everything. And again, like these two, I wanted Lan and Stepan to fuck. You could definitely have felt it between those two, and I would have been here for it because Stepan was a very good looking man. But unfortunately, after that moment, Lan gets drugged and Stepan goes and takes his life, and it's a really heartbreaking scene where we see Lan find Stepan's body and having killed himself. I actually thought he was going to kill Logain, and Logain was going to get killed at some point, so I thought that was going to be the end of that character's storyline, but clearly not the case here. And warning here, because we're obviously going to talk about suicide, but this whole sequence read very true to me, because when someone has died by suicide, right before then, you often see them become much more positive and outgoing, and that is because they have made the decision to go through with that act. And because they have made that decision, they often tend to seem like they have gotten better, because they have seemed to understand that they may have found a way out when that is clearly not the case, without realizing how much they are loved and cared for and desired, and they feel like they only have one way out when that isn't true. But Stepan in this episode definitely showcases that feeling of someone who was depressed, went through all of this, and has made a choice to end their life. And as someone who has felt that in my life, it read very true to see that and how it was depicted here, and as heartbreaking as it was depicted here in this episode. I have to say, the final sequence of the episode, I'll talk about Night and Eve in just a second, but the final sequence of the episode, just to stay on this storyline, is Wow. The acting in that sequence was hot dang. Broke my heart. As anyone who's lost someone to suicide who they care about, I thought that this really expressed that very well. And I liked seeing the two different versions of how that grief comes out between Moraine and Lan. Lan just going down on his knees and screaming. I did feel like the last scream was a little bit melodramatic. It was a little bit over the top, but the first two, the actor who plays Lan just nailed that. And I was like, oh boy. And you see that even more in Moraine, who is just like hitting her chest and just carrying it all inside as she hears the screaming. I'm almost tearing up thinking about it right now. Brilliantly performed. Like I think it tipped a little bit too much towards the end of the scene. I think I wished if they had chopped it off just a hair sooner. But overall, that sequence was beautiful. And really evoked what it feels like to lose someone from suicide, speaking from personal perspective here. But moving on from that, because I don't want to end on a downer note for this review, I really loved all the stuff with Night and Eve throughout the episode. We're very much learning about the politics of the tower. We're starting to see like the different factions going on in the tower, and that this is very much a ton of internal politics going on here, where we have Leandrin, the Red Aes Sedai, trying to vie for power to get Night and Eve on her side. And there's a great little scene between two of them. I'm like, oh, there's some tension here too. I can definitely feel some tension here too. But then we have Moraine confronting Leandrin just a few seconds later, and also I felt like some tension there as well. There was some hate fucking going on between those two, but I just like Moraine just sort of standing like, I'm not bothered by you. Just stay away. Like, it's okay. I can play your game too. And that sort of starts to hint at the rivalry between these two that Moraine doesn't really seem to care about, but is very much she's entrenched in, because we learn that the head of the Aes Sedai is coming back and wants someone to answer for the Aes Sedai's death. And Moraine might have her head on the chopping block because she is seen as a threat, despite the fact that it seems like she has no caring for politics. And we learn from Moraine's friend, who I forget her name, but they were like in the bed together, which again, more romantic tension. They're both lying in bed talking. Like, what? I'm just saying, this tower just filled with it, and starting to learn that from her that Moraine is seen as a rival to both of these characters, and that there's definitely some politics going on here for all of that. So interesting to start to see some of the political machinations coming into the series, and I'm really enjoying that. That's some of my favorite stuff of any type of fantasy science fiction type of show, when we bring in like different politics and we learn about different factions and things like that. Some of my favorite stuff. So I was really enjoying all of that here, and how Night and Eve is that she's kind of stepping into a lion's den and doesn't necessarily know where she should end up. And I think that's kind of a scary place to be if you're a person, but a really cool place to be in as a viewer of the show. So I'm excited to see where all that's going to go. But with all of that said, that is officially my review of this episode. I really enjoyed it. Again, it wasn't like an over-the-top, like, amazing episode for me. I was more of a putting people in their place episode, which is kind of important for any type of show. You always kind of have these episodes, but there's a lot of intriguing world building and ground laying here that has me very excited into the next phase of this series so far, and I'm pumped for it. So that's everything I have to say. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. Again, don't forget, if you're going to comment down below, please give me a little bit of a spoiler warning so I don't accidentally read a spoiler, because I do try to read all of the comments as best I can. But beyond that, thank you so much, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on my thoughts on the episode. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I have another channel as well called Jessie Gender, where I do more video essay type stuff. It's my bigger channel. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.